My name is Rebecca Mitchell. I was always the responsible one, the older sister who had it together. At least that's what everyone said, especially my brother Marcus. You're the golden child, Becca. He'd joke, sprawled across my couch during one of his impromptu visits, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his fingers. Some of us weren't born with the responsibility gene. I'd smile and continue organizing my bills, each one neatly categorized, each payment scheduled exactly 5 days before the due date. That was me, organized, reliable, predictable. The perfect opposite to Marcus's chaos. I believed him. I believed all of them, my parents, who praised my level-headedness while excusing Marcus's free spirit, my aunts and uncles who called me the reliable one at family gatherings. Even Marcus himself, who seemed to wear his irresponsibility like a badge of honor. After a while, our roles weren't just habits, they were identities. Marcus was the charming dreamer. I was the sensible planner. He took risks. I created safety nets. He crashed. I cushioned his fall. Our dynamic was never more apparent than at the annual Mitchell family reunion last summer. We gathered at Lake Chelan, where my parents had rented a sprawling cabin for the extended family. I arrived early to help Mom set up, of course. Marcus arrived 3 hours late with a new girlfriend and no contribution to the potluck. Classic Marcus, my cousin Lisa whispered, and we all laughed, because what else could you do? That was just how he was. Later that evening, as the sun set over the lake and the older generation retreated indoors, Marcus cornered me on the deck. The girlfriend was gone, probably bored by our family's predictable rhythms, and he had that look in his eyes, the one that always preceded a request for money. "How's the job going?" he asked, leaning against the railing. "Still killing it in finance?" I nodded cautiously. "It's fine. Busy, but good." "You must be making bank by now." He glanced around to make sure we were alone. "Speaking of which," and there it was. He needed money for rent. His roommate had bailed. His hours at the restaurant had been cut. The girlfriend had expensive tastes. The usual story, with minor variations. And as usual, I reached for my wallet. "This is the last time," I said, as I always did. "You're a lifesaver, Beck," he replied, as he always did. So, when he called me that cool September evening 2 months later, his voice tight with panic, I didn't hesitate. I was sitting at my kitchen island, sorting through mail after a long day at work, when my phone lit up with his name. "Becca, I'm in trouble." His voice had that breathless quality it got when he was either extremely excited or deeply anxious. "The bank won't approve my loan without a cosigner. It's for the business. You know how much this means to me." The business was a food truck Marcus had been talking about for years. Portland Pierogies, he was going to call it. He'd spent a summer in Poland during college and returned obsessed with the doughy dumplings. It was always going to be the thing that turned his life around, that finally gave him purpose. Every few months, he'd mention it again, showing me sketches of logos or texting me photos of food trucks in other cities. I pictured him in his apartment, probably pacing, probably running his hands through his hair the way he did when he was stressed. 3 months ago, he'd announced he was getting serious about the business plan. 2 months ago, at the reunion, he'd mentioned meeting with a loan officer. Now, apparently, he'd reached the final hurdle. I thought about saying no. For one brief, clear moment, I almost did. Something about his timing felt off-calling at 8:30 on a Tuesday, when he knew I'd be tired from work, when my defenses would be down. But then I thought about how he might actually follow through this time, how this could be the opportunity he needed to stabilize his life, how proud our parents would be if Marcus finally settled into something responsible. Instead of saying no, I said, "Email me the documents." "I knew I could count on you," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I'll send them over right now." I signed the papers the next day. The loan was for $45,000 more than I expected, but not outrageous for starting a small business. I told myself this was an investment in Marcus's future. I told myself this time would be different. For a while, it seemed like it was. Marcus sent photos of a used food truck he'd purchased. He called excitedly about commercial kitchen spaces he was checking out. He even created social media accounts for Portland Pierogies, complete with mouth-watering photos of test batches he was making in his apartment. Our parents were thrilled. He's finally finding his way. Mom said during our weekly Sunday call, and it's all because you believed in him, Becca. I felt a glow of pride. Maybe this was what Marcus had needed all along, not just financial support, but someone who truly believed he could succeed. 3 months after signing the loan papers, on a drizzly Thursday afternoon, I sat in front of my laptop in my small home office, preparing to refinance my condo. Interest rates had dropped, and my financial advisor suggested it was a good time to lock in a lower rate. I pulled up my credit report, expecting the usual excellent score I'd maintained since college. The numbers didn't make sense. There had to be a mistake. My credit score had plummeted nearly 150 points since I'd last checked. I scrolled through the report, looking for the error, when my eyes caught on something strange: a credit card I didn't recognize, opened 18 months ago. I scrolled further. Another credit card, opened 2 years ago. A personal loan from a bank I'd never used. An auto loan for a car I'd never driven. Account after account, loan after loan, all in my name, all opened within the last 4 years. Some were in good standing, with regular payments. Others showed missed payments, collection notices. A personal loan that had been in collections for over a year. My hands began to shake. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. I went to my file cabinet and pulled out my carefully organized financial records. I double-checked my own credit cards, loans, legitimate accounts. None of these matched what I was seeing on the screen. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus without thinking. He answered on the third ring, his voice casual, almost bored. "Hey, what's up?" "Marcus," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Why is there a car loan in my name from 2 years ago?" The silence stretched for several seconds. Then, "I can explain. I'm looking at my credit report right now," I continued, the calm in my voice betrayed by the trembling of my hands. "There are at least 7 accounts I never opened." Another pause. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because what I think is that you've been using my identity to open credit accounts for years. What I think is that you've been stealing from me." I wouldn't call it stealing. I hung up. I didn't want explanations. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted this to be a clerical error, a glitch in the system, anything but what I already knew it was. I sat at my desk, staring at the report, trying to make sense of the scope of the betrayal. Some of the accounts dated back to just after Marcus had stayed with me for 3 weeks 4 years ago, during what he'd called a transition period between apartments. I remembered now how he'd often offered to check my mail, sort through my paperwork, how he'd had unfettered access to my computer, my files, my personal information. And what about the food truck loan? Was that even real? I searched my email for the documents he'd sent, opening them with shaking hands. The loan was real enough, but the business name listed wasn't Portland Pierogies. It was Marcus Mitchell Consulting LLC, a company I'd never heard of. Within an hour of my call, Marcus was at my doorstep. I hadn't invited him, but that had never stopped Marcus before. Through the peephole, I could see him shifting from foot to foot, his expression contrite. I almost didn't let him in. But some part of me, the part that had been conditioned to fix his problems, to hear him out, to give him yet another chance, turned the knob. He stood in my living room, looking nothing like the desperate man I'd imagined during that phone call 3 months earlier. His clothes were new, a sleek navy sweater I recognized. From a high-end store, designer jeans, leather boots that probably cost more than my monthly utility bills. His haircut was expensive, his skin clear and tanned, as if he'd recently been somewhere sunny and warm. He looked successful, put together. He looked like someone who didn't need to steal his sister's identity. "You look well," I said coldly. He had the decency to look embarrassed, at least. "Becca, I know how this seems." "Does it seem like fraud?" "Because that's what it is." "It started with just 1 card," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I was in a tight spot and I knew you'd say no if I asked directly. Your credit was so good and mine was. Well, you know, I did know. I'd loaned him money to pay off his credit card debt twice in college. Each time, he'd promised to be more responsible. Each time, I'd believed him." "So you decided to just become me?" My voice sounded strange, detached. "How many accounts, Marcus? How bad is it?" He shrugged, an infuriatingly casual gesture. I don't know exactly, 6, maybe 7? But Becca, I've been making payments on most of them. Most of them. I repeated his words, letting their weight hang in the air between us. The car loan got away from me, he admitted. And there was a credit card I maxed out when the food truck needed repairs. But I was going to fix it. I just needed more time. The food truck? I laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar in my throat. You mean the one from Portland Pierogies? The business you claim to be starting? He had the grace to look ashamed. I did buy a food truck, it just didn't work out. And the loan I just co-signed for Marcus Mitchell Consulting? That's a real business, he insisted, stepping toward me. I'm doing social media consulting for restaurants. The food truck pivot didn't pan out, but this is taking off. I have clients, Becca. Real ones. I stepped back. Don't come any closer to me. He stopped, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. I know I messed up, but I can fix this. I'm making good money now. I can pay everything off, get your credit score back up. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and for the first time in my life I saw him clearly. The practiced contrition in his expression, the calculated vulnerability. The way his eyes darted around, assessing my reaction, adjusting his approach accordingly. All those years of believing he was just irresponsible, just impulsive, just unlucky. It had been an act, a long con with me as the mark. How did you do it? I asked, curiosity temporarily overriding my anger. How did you open accounts in my name? He hesitated, as if weighing whether honesty would help or hurt his case. I had your social security number, your date of birth. For the first few, I used your address, then had the statements redirected. For the later ones, I listed my address as yours. It wasn't hard. A chill ran through me as I realized how simple it had been for him, how vulnerable my identity had been in the hands of someone I trusted completely. Does Mom know? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Our mother had always enabled Marcus, always found excuses for his behavior, always pushed me to understand and forgive. His gaze darted away, then back to me. She helped me with some of the paperwork, not all of it, just when I needed a different address, or when a bank required additional verification. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Not just Marcus. My mother, too. My mother, who had always pushed me to help your brother out and be understanding, and remember that not everyone has your advantages. Get out, I said quietly. Becca, please, we can work this out. I'll pay everything back, I swear. I have a plan. Get out. He took a step toward me, his expression pleading. You're my sister. We're family. You can't just… Family doesn't steal from family, I said, my voice rising. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and commit fraud. That's not family, Marcus. That's predatory. Something shifted in his expression then, the mask of contrition slipping to reveal a flash of anger. You've always been so self-righteous, so perfect. You have no idea what it's like to struggle, to need help. Help? I laughed incredulously. I have helped you. For years, I've helped you. I've loaned you money, let you stay at my place, co-signed your lease, given you references for jobs. I've done everything but breathe for you. And you've loved every minute of it, he shot back. Saint Rebecca, always there to bail out her screw-up brother. It makes you feel good, doesn't it, superior? His words hit me like a physical blow. Was that how he saw me? As someone who helped him not out of love or concern, but out of some twisted need to feel superior? I've helped you because I love you, I said quietly. But I won't help you destroy my life in the process. Get out of my house, Marcus. Now. After he left, slamming the door behind him, I sat in silence for a long time. The rain outside had turned to a downpour, drumming against my windows like impatient fingers. I should have been crying. I should have been screaming. Instead, I felt strangely hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of me, leaving only an echo where my trust had been. I spent the rest of the evening in a daze, mechanically going through motions. I ordered a complete credit freeze. I changed all my passwords. I gathered every financial document I could find, creating a file of evidence for what I knew would be a long and painful process of reclaiming my identity not just financially, but emotionally as well. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying conversations, interactions, moments when I should have seen the signs. The unexplained purchases Marcus sometimes made. The way he'd periodically seem flush with cash despite his supposedly unstable employment. The times he'd ask about my financial matters with a casualness that now seemed calculated. I called my mother the next morning. It was early, not yet 7, but I knew she'd be awake. Mom was an early riser, always had been. She answered with her usual cheerfulness, as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't betrayed me in the most fundamental way. "Rebecca, honey, I was just thinking about you. Are you coming to dinner on Sunday? Your father's making his famous ribs. Did you help Marcus steal my identity?" I asked without preamble. The silence on the other end told me everything. If she'd been innocent, she would have been confused, concerned, asking for clarification. Instead, there was just the soft sound of her breathing, the slight catch that told me she was formulating a response. "It wasn't stealing," she finally said, her voice defensive. "He's your brother. Family helps family." "That's not help, Mom. That's fraud." "Don't be so dramatic." Her tone hardened. "He needed a hand getting on his feet. You've always been so blessed, Rebecca. Good jobs. Good credit. Would it kill you to share some of that luck?" Luck. As if my careful saving, my diligent payments, my years of financial discipline had been some cosmic accident rather than choices I made every day. "I'm filing a police report," I said. "You wouldn't." Her voice turned pleading. "Rebecca, think about what this would do to the family. Think about your brother's future." "I am thinking about his future," I replied. "And mine." I hung up before she could respond, before she could twist my words or make me doubt myself, as she'd done so many times before. I sat at my kitchen table, hands flat against the cool surface, and tried to control my breathing. The betrayal felt physical, a weight pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. My phone lit up almost immediately. Mom calling back. I declined the call. It lit up again. Marcus this time. I declined that too. Then a text from my father. "We need to talk about this as a family. Call your mother." I turned my phone off completely. The police station was busy when I arrived later that morning. I waited on a hard plastic chair, clutching a folder of printouts, credit reports, account statements, evidence of the fraud that had been happening under my nose for years. When my name was finally called, I followed an officer to a small, windowless room. Detective Rivera was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Tell me what's going on," she said, opening a notebook. I told her everything, my voice surprisingly steady. I'd expected to break down, to feel overwhelmed by the enormity of what I was doing, reporting my own brother, implicating my mother. Instead, I felt a strange, calm clarity, as if I were finally seeing the situation for what it was. Not a family problem to be solved with compromise and forgiveness, but a crime to be addressed with consequences and boundaries. Detective Rivera listened attentively, taking notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she looked up at me with an expression of genuine sympathy. "This kind of identity theft is more common than you might think," she said, "especially within families. People are less likely to report loved ones, and the perpetrators know that." "I never thought I'd be sitting here," I admitted, "but I can't keep pretending this is okay." "You're doing the right thing," she assured me. "What your brother did, what your mother helped him do, it's a crime. A serious one." I nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly at her validation. For years, I'd been made to feel that setting boundaries with Marcus was selfish, that protecting myself came at the cost of being a good sister. Hearing someone in authority affirm that I had a right to protect myself was unexpectedly powerful. The next few weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Credit bureaus, banks, police stations, fraud departments. I told my story over and over, each repetition scraping me a little more raw. Yes, I knew who had done this. Yes, it was my brother. Yes, my mother had been involved. No, I did not want to work it out privately. No, I would not drop the charges. The financial damage was substantial. Over $65,000 in fraudulent debt, some of it already in collections, damaging my once pristine credit score. Accounts I'd never authorized using my name, my social security number, my good reputation to fuel Marcus's lifestyle. The emotional damage was incalculable. My mother called daily at first, her messages alternating between guilt trips and angry accusations. How could you do this to your own brother? After everything we've done for you, I raised you better than this. I stopped listening to the voicemails after the first week, deleted them unheard, a small act of self-preservation. Marcus didn't call. Instead, he sent a single text message. I never meant to hurt you. I just needed help. I hope someday you'll understand. I blocked his number without responding. My father called me a week after I filed the police report. He had always been the quiet one, the peacemaker who stayed out of conflicts. I hadn't heard from him since everything erupted, though I'd half expected him to take their side immediately. That was his pattern to back my mother in any disagreement, to prioritize keeping the peace over addressing the underlying issues. Your mother is devastated, he said without greeting. I'm devastated too, I replied. He sighed heavily. Rebecca, I understand you're upset, but this is family. We can fix this within the family. Did you know, I asked, about what they were doing? The pause before he answered was all I needed to hear. If he'd been genuinely shocked, if this had been news to him, there would have been no hesitation. I suspected, he admitted, but I thought Marcus was handling it. I thought it was temporary. 4 years of fraud, 7 accounts, 2 loans. Temporary was just another lie they'd told themselves to justify what they were doing. I can't believe you're doing this to us, my father said, his voice tight with accusation, after everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Besides watching while Mom and Marcus destroyed my credit? Besides calling to guilt me when I finally stand up for myself? We're your family. Not anymore. The words came out before I could consider them, but as soon as they were spoken, I knew they were true. Family meant trust, support, respect. What they had shown me was none of those things. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights blink on as dusk settled over Portland. The air was cool, carrying the earthy scent of impending rain. For the first time since discovering Marcus's betrayal, I let myself cry not delicate tears, but ugly, racking sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the brother I thought I had, for the relationship built on what I now recognized as manipulation rather than love. I cried for the parents who had enabled his behavior, who had participated in his deception. Most of all, I cried for myself for the trust I had given so freely, only to have it shattered beyond repair. When the tears finally subsided, I felt different. Not healed, not whole, but clearer. As if the grief had washed away a layer of fog, allowing me to see the situation and my family with painful clarity. The worst part wasn't the practical aftermath, the frozen accounts, the credit monitoring, the identity theft affidavits. It wasn't even the jarring absence of people I'd thought would always be in my life. The worst part was the doubt that crept in during quiet moments. Had I overreacted? Was I being too harsh? Family helps family. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? It took 3 meetings with a therapist for me to name what I was feeling. Not guilt, but grief. I was mourning the family I thought I had, the relationships I believed in. I was grieving the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. Dr. Levine, my therapist, was a calm, steady presence as I navigated these complex emotions. In our 3rd session, she asked a question that stopped me in my tracks. Rebecca, what would you tell a friend who was in your situation? If someone came to you and told you their brother had stolen their identity with their mother's help, what advice would you give? I didn't hesitate. I'd tell them to protect themselves, to set boundaries, to report it. And would you think they were overreacting, being too harsh? No, I said slowly. I'd think they were being brave. Dr. Levine nodded. So why is it different when it's you? I didn't have an answer. Or rather, the answer was too painful to articulate, because I'd been conditioned my entire life to put my family's needs above my own, to be the responsible one, the fixer, the safety net. To believe that love meant sacrifice, even when the sacrifice was harmful. 2 months after filing the police report, I received a call from Detective Rivera. Marcus had been arrested. The case was moving forward. Would I be willing to testify if necessary? Yes, I said, without hesitation. Are you sure? She asked gently. It's not easy to testify against family. I'm sure, I replied. This needs to stop. That night, I dreamed of Marcus as a child 8 years old, gap-toothed and freckled, looking up at me with adoration as I helped him build a fort in our backyard. In the dream, he reached for my hand and said, "You always take care of me, don't you, Becca?" I woke with tears on my face and an ache in my chest that felt like it might never heal. The criminal case proceeded slowly, grinding through the legal system with what felt like glacial progress. Marcus accepted a plea deal, eventually probation, restitution, community service. No jail time, which was both a relief and a disappointment. Part of me wanted him to face serious consequences. Another part couldn't bear the thought of him behind bars. My mother never apologized. Instead, she told extended family and mutual friends that I had abandoned Marcus in his time of need, that I was vindictive and unforgiving. Some believed her. Others reached out privately to express support, to say they'd seen the pattern for years and were glad I'd finally stood up for myself. My father vacillated between pleading for reconciliation and cold silence. "Your mother is not well," he told me during one of our infrequent phone calls. "The stress of all this is making her sick." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my mother to suffer. I just couldn't keep suffering myself to spare her the consequences of her actions. 6 months after I discovered Marcus's betrayal, I sold my condo and moved to Denver. I had no ties to the city, no friends or family connections. That was the appeal. In my new apartment, with its views of mountains I was still getting used to, I slowly rebuilt my life. New job, new routines, new credit score climbing back towards where it had been. The first few months were the hardest. I jumped every time my phone rang with an unknown number. I checked my credit report obsessively, terrified of finding new fraudulent accounts. I had nightmares where I discovered my entire identity had been stolen, where I ceased to exist at all. But gradually, things improved. I made friends at work. I found a hiking group that met on weekends, exploring the trails outside the city. I discovered a small pottery studio where I spent Wednesday evenings learning to center clay on a wheel, physical metaphor for the emotional centering I was trying to achieve in my life. I changed my phone number but kept my email address. That's how my cousin Ellie found me, almost a year after everything happened. Her message was short, almost cryptic. "I know what they did to you. I believe you. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." We exchanged a few cautious emails. She told me Marcus had been charged with identity theft, but had taken a plea deal. My mother was telling everyone I had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. My father had stopped talking about me altogether. "They're playing the victims," Ellie wrote. "But I wanted you to know that not everyone believes them. Some of us remember how they've always treated you, always leaned on you without giving anything back." Her words were like rain on parched soil, a validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. Someone saw. Someone knew. I wasn't crazy for protecting myself. Ellie and I began talking regularly. She visited me in Denver that summer, and for the first time, I felt like I had family again, real family, based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. "I always admired you," she confessed over coffee on her last day. "You seemed so together, so strong. But now I realize what a burden that must have been, always being the responsible one, the one everyone leaned on." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. I didn't know how to be anything else. "And now?" she asked. I thought about it. Now I'm learning to be responsible for myself first, to set boundaries, to recognize that saying no doesn't make me selfish or cold. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Rebecca. That takes real courage." 2 years after moving to Denver, I received a manila envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a check for $15,000 and a note that simply read, "I'm sorry, M." I looked at the check for a long time, running my fingers over the edges, feeling the slight texture of the paper. It wasn't enough to cover all the damage he'd done, all the debt he'd accumulated in my name. It wasn't enough to repair the trust he'd broken or restore the family I'd lost. But it was something, an acknowledgement at least, that what he'd done was wrong. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I placed it in a drawer, a tangible reminder that I had been right to stand my ground, right to protect myself, right to demand the truth. Maybe someday I'd be ready to close that chapter completely, to release the last threads of hurt and betrayal. But not yet. 6 months later, there was another envelope, smaller this time, a regular business envelope with a Denver postmark. Inside was a brochure for a rehab facility, and another note in Marcus's handwriting. I'm getting help, for real this time. Not just for the identity theft, but for everything: the lying, the manipulation, the using people who care about me. I don't expect forgiveness. I just thought you should know. I sat with the brochure in my hands, feeling a complex mix of emotion: skepticism, hope, wariness, a flicker of something that might have been pride. Was this another manipulation? A play for sympathy? Or was it genuine change? I decided it didn't matter. Whether Marcus was truly changing or not, my boundaries remained the same. I could wish him well without letting him back into my life. I could hope for his recovery without making myself vulnerable to further betrayal. I didn't respond to the note, but I didn't throw it away either. Life continued. Seasons changed. The mountains outside my window wore their winter white, then spring green, then summer gold. I was promoted at work. I went on dates, some good, some awkward, one that developed into something that felt like it might last. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a scruffy terrier mix who greeted each day with unrestrained enthusiasm. On my 30th birthday, I took myself to a high-end restaurant, ordered champagne, and toasted my own resilience. Later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Happy birthday, Becca. I hope you're well, Marcus." I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the block button. Then, surprising myself, I typed back, "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just 2 words, an acknowledgement that despite everything, I didn't wish him ill. That was all I could offer, and for now, it was enough. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from somewhere nearby. I thought about family, not the one I'd lost, but the one I might someday build. People chosen for their kindness, their honesty, their respect for boundaries. People who would never mistake love for ownership or loyalty for blind obedience. I took a deep breath, feeling the clean mountain air fill my lungs, and made a promise to myself. I would never again allow anyone to confuse my strength for invulnerability or my generosity for weakness. I would never again silence my instincts for the comfort of others. Some people believe blood is thicker than water, that family ties should prevail over all other considerations. I used to believe that too. Now I know better. True family, whether bound by blood or by choice, lifts you up. It doesn't drain you dry. It supports your growth rather than exploiting your goodness. I don't know if I'll ever fully reconcile with my brother or my parents. Some breaks can't be mended, some trust can't be restored. But I do know this: walking away wasn't a failure of love, it was an act of self-respect. And in the end, respecting yourself is the foundation upon which all healthy relationships must be built. The following spring, I received an invitation to my cousin Ellie's wedding. The venue was in Portland, just a few miles from my old home. Going back meant possibly seeing my parents, possibly confronting Marcus face to face for the first time in years. The thought made my stomach clench with anxiety. "You don't have to go," my boyfriend David said when I showed him the invitation. "Ellie would understand." "I know," I replied, "but I'm tired of avoiding places and events because of them. I'm tired of giving them that power." So we went. The ceremony was beautiful, the reception elegant but warm. Ellie had seated me with friends from college, far from the table where my parents sat, their expressions tight and uncomfortable whenever they glanced my way. Marcus was there too, subdued in a dark suit that hung slightly loose on his frame. He'd lost weight, and there was a new gravity to his expression that I didn't recognize. When our eyes met across the room, he gave a slight nod but didn't approach. It was during the dancing, as David and I swayed to a slow song among other couples, that Marcus finally came over. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the dance floor until the song ended, then cleared his throat. "Rebecca," he said, his voice hoarse, "you look well." "Thank you," I replied. "So do you." He nodded, eyes darting to David, then back to me. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. In person. For everything." I felt David's hand reassuring at the small of my back, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone this time, that I had support now, real support. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. Marcus seemed to want to say more, but instead he simply nodded, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I'm clean now," he added after a moment. 14 months. Turns out it wasn't just financial addiction I was dealing with. That explained some things. The weight loss, the subdued demeanor, the lack of the flashy clothes and accessories I'd grown accustomed to seeing him in. "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. Whatever anger I still carried, I didn't want him to suffer. I just wanted him far from my finances, my identity, my carefully rebuilt life. "Mom and Dad still don't really get it," he said, glancing toward their table. "They think this was all just a misunderstanding, that you overreacted." I stiffened, waiting for the familiar pressure, the subtle suggestion that I should just let it go, that I should be the bigger person, that I should sacrifice my boundaries for family harmony. It didn't come. "They're wrong," Marcus said, his voice firm. "What I did, what we did, it was wrong, criminal, unforgivable." He swallowed hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that at least one person in this family understands what we took from you. And it wasn't just money." Before I could respond, the music changed to something upbeat, and the dance floor suddenly filled with laughing guests. Marcus stepped back, gave a small half-wave, and disappeared into the crowd. David squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? No, not entirely. The wounds were still there, the trust still broken. But standing there in that moment, I realized something important. I was healing. Not healed, perhaps never completely healed, but moving forward, step by step, into a life that was truly mine. "I will be," I answered, and led him back onto the dance floor. The next morning, as David and I checked out of our hotel, the concierge handed me an envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Marcus's handwriting. Everything I could salvage about the accounts, the fraud, the paperwork, it might help with the last of the cleanup. I know it's too little, too late, but it's what I have to offer. I slipped it into my purse without comment. On the drive back to the airport, through the lush green landscape of the Pacific Northwest, David asked if I wanted to talk about it. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe not ever." He nodded, understanding without pushing, one of the qualities I'd grown to love about him. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." The USB drive stayed in my purse for weeks. I wasn't ready to look at its contents, to immerse myself back into that trauma, but I also couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It represented something I hadn't expected. Accountability. Not complete, not nearly enough to erase the damage, but real, nonetheless. Summer turned to fall. My job offered me a promotion that would require occasional travel. David and I moved in together, merging our book collections and arguing good-naturedly about whose coffee maker to keep. Life continued its steady forward motion. One crisp October evening, I finally plugged in the USB drive. It contained exactly what Marcus had promised: detailed records of the fraudulent accounts, emails between him and my mother discussing how to use my information, scanned copies of forged documents. It was both more and less than I'd expected. More evidence, more betrayal, more confirmation that what had happened was calculated, deliberate. But also less dramatic than the shadowy nightmares that sometimes still woke me in a cold sweat. I forwarded the relevant documents to my lawyer, then deleted the files from my computer. The physical drive I dropped into a drawer, another artifact of a chapter I was slowly closing. 3 years to the day after I discovered Marcus's betrayal, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a handcrafted wooden box, beautifully carved with a mountain landscape. The note read simply, "For new beginnings, M." I ran my fingers over the smooth wood, feeling the ridges and valleys of the carved mountains. It was beautiful, thoughtful in a way that the old Marcus, the taker, the user, would never have been capable of. I placed it on my bookshelf, not hidden away but not prominently displayed either. A complicated memento of a complicated relationship. That evening, when David asked about the box, I told him the whole story, not just the betrayal, which he already knew, but the aftermath, the slow and painful process of detaching, the lingering questions about whether family could ever truly be family again after such a fundamental breach of trust. "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" he asked. I looked out our window at the mountains, solid and immovable against the darkening sky. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "With Marcus. Maybe, someday, in some limited way, if he continues to respect boundaries, if he truly understands what he did. And your parents?" I shook my head. "They still don't see what they did wrong. They still think I'm the villain in this story. I can't reconcile with people who refuse to acknowledge the harm they caused." David nodded, pulling me closer on the couch. "You know, when we first met, you told me you didn't have family. Then later you amended that to no family I'm in contact with. I thought maybe there was some big dramatic falling out over politics or lifestyle choices." I laughed softly. "Sorry to disappoint with my mundane story of identity theft and betrayal." "Not mundane at all," he said, his tone serious. "But what amazes me is how you've handled it. You didn't let it make you bitter. You didn't let it destroy your capacity to trust." Had I managed that? I wasn't sure. I still checked my credit report monthly. I still felt a jolt of anxiety when the phone rang from an unknown number. I still kept important documents in a fireproof safe with a combination no one else knew. But I had let David in. I had built new friendships in Denver. I had created a life that wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I'd chosen to build. "It's a work in progress," I said. The following spring, David proposed during a hike in the mountains, the same peaks that had become a symbol of stability in my new life. We planned a small wedding for the fall, just close friends and chosen family. I didn't send invitations to my parents or Marcus, a decision that brought both relief and a dull ache of what might have been. 2 weeks before the wedding, a card arrived from Portland. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note in my mother's handwriting. "For your wedding. No strings attached. I won't come if you don't want me there, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. Love, Mom." I stared at the check, emotions warring inside me. Was this a genuine attempt at amends? Or another manipulation, a way to buy back into my life without acknowledging the real issues? David found me sitting at the kitchen table, still holding the card. "What's wrong?" he asked. I handed him the card silently. He read it, then looked at me with concerned eyes. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to rip it up and send it back. Part of me wonders if this is her way of trying to make amends." "You don't have to decide right now," he said gently. "And whatever you decide is okay." I nodded, grateful once again for his understanding. I tucked the card into my desk drawer, needing time to process, to decide what this gesture meant and how I wanted to respond. The night before our wedding, I finally made a decision. I wrote my mother a brief note. "Thank you for the gift. I'm returning it because accepting it would feel like putting a price on what happened, and some things can't be bought or sold. I appreciate the thought, but what I've always needed wasn't money. It was honesty, respect, and accountability. I hope someday we can have a conversation about that. Until then, I wish you well, Rebecca." I enclosed the check, sealed the envelope, and asked a friend to mail it for me after the ceremony. Whatever happened next would happen after I was already married, already embarking on this new chapter of my life. Our wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the aspens along the mountainside a brilliant gold against the deep blue Colorado sky. As I prepared with my bridesmaids, friends from work, from my hiking group, from my pottery class, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. My journey had been difficult, painful, but it had led me here, to this day, to these people who loved me for who I truly was, not for what I could provide or fix or solve. During the small reception afterward, as David and I moved from table to table greeting our guests, I spotted a figure standing at the back of the venue, tall, lean, familiar. Marcus. He wasn't trying to join the celebration. He stood apart, dressed well but simply, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then turned to leave. I excused myself from David's side and made my way through the crowd. By the time I reached the door, Marcus was already in the parking lot, keys in hand. "Marcus," I called. He turned, surprise evident on his face. Rebecca? I'm sorry. I know I wasn't invited. I wanted to see you happy. How did you know about today? Ellie told me. He shrugged. I was visiting Portland, ran into her at the grocery store. She mentioned she was flying out for your wedding. I nodded, crossing my arms against the autumn chill. You could have called. Would you have answered? It was a fair question. Probably not, I admitted. He smiled slightly. You look beautiful. Happy. He seems like a good guy. He is. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, years of pain and betrayal and distance stretching between us like a vast canyon. I'm not staying, Marcus said finally. I just wanted to see for myself that you found what you deserve. A good life. Someone who appreciates you for the right reasons. I studied his face, looking for signs of the old Marcus, the manipulation, the calculation, the subtle angle for personal gain. I didn't see it. What I saw instead was something new, or perhaps something very old, glimpses of the brother I'd loved before everything went so wrong. Thank you for coming, I said, surprising myself with the sincerity in my voice. He nodded, then hesitated, as if debating whether to say more. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I wrote this, in case I didn't get to talk to you. It explains everything. As best I can. You don't have to read it now, maybe not ever, but it's yours if you want it. I took the envelope, feeling its slight weight in my palm. I should get back. Of course. He took a step back. Congratulations, Rebecca, truly. I watched him drive away, the envelope still in my hand, then returned to the reception, to David, to our celebration. The envelope remained in my purse throughout the evening, through the toasts and the dancing and the cake cutting. I didn't mention it to David, not yet. Some conversations were for later, for the quiet of our own home after the festivities ended. That night, as David slept beside me in our hotel suite, I finally opened the letter. It was several pages long, handwritten in Marcus's neat script. It began simply, Dear Rebecca, there are no excuses for what I did to you. Only explanations, which I'm offering not to justify my actions, but to help you understand that none of it was your fault. I read the entire letter, tears streaming silently down my face. Marcus wrote about his addiction, not just to substances, but to the high of manipulation, of getting away with things. He wrote about the toxic dynamics in our family that had cast me as the perpetual giver and him as the perpetual taker. He wrote about his journey through recovery, about facing the full weight of what he'd done to me and others who had trusted him. Most importantly, he wrote without asking for anything in return, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not absolution, just understanding, if I was willing to give it. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day. A new beginning. I didn't know if Marcus and I would ever rebuild a relationship. I didn't know if my parents would ever truly understand the damage they had done. But I did know this. I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me. I was defined by what I had built from the ruins, a life of authentic connections, clear boundaries, and genuine love. Later that morning, as David and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, I sent Marcus a simple text. I got your letter. Thank you for your honesty. I need time, but I'm open to talking when we get back. His response came almost immediately. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just a small opening, a crack in the wall I had built to protect myself. Whether it would lead to healing or heartbreak remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, I was willing to find out. Have you ever had to choose between your well-being and family expectations? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely had betrayed that trust? How did you find the strength to move forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Drop a 1 if this story resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more real talks about family, boundaries, and healing.